Beyond the headlines, the noise, the spin, we seek the stories that live within. Past party lines, past powers disguised, we hear the truth in everyday lives. A space for voices, both gentle and strong. Beyond politics, where we all belong.
Hi everyone, my name is Jin Qian and welcome to Beyond Politics on Ozark Media. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Jason Yat-Sen Li MP, the member for Strathfield. For those that may not be familiar, the electorate of Strathfield covers suburbs like Belfield, Croydon, Burwood, Enfield, Strathfield, Strathfield South, Homebush West, Homebush, Belfield, Croydon Park, and Campsie. Good to see you again, Jason.
Nice to see you, Jing. Great to be here.
You're a very local and active member. We always see each other in local events, and now having a sit-down opportunity is even better.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Now, we always like to get to know the person behind the role first. So in a nutshell, before becoming an MP, who were you and what shaped your values growing up?
My story is a pretty classic Australian migrant story. You know, my mum and dad migrated to Australia from Hong Kong a long time ago. Dad came in 1960 as an international student. Mum's family actually migrated to New Zealand first in 1955, but they
Right.
knew each other. They knew each other from Hong Kong, so they stayed in touch and ended up getting married. And I had a classic migrant upbringing. I grew up in Bexley, in Sydney southwest. I went to the local schools. I went to Kingsgrove Public School, and then I went to Hurstville Public School, the OC class there. So I had a really classic sort of migrant upbringing where we didn't have a lot of money. Mum was a primary school teacher in the public system for most of her career. Dad had a small business. He's an electrical engineer, so he manufactured fire protection equipment for buildings and that. So Dad was a small businessman,
Wow.
and look, we never had a lot of money. But my parents, like I think so many migrant parents and well, parents generally, just worked so hard so that myself and my sister, we could have the best opportunities and the best education. And yeah, that was my upbringing. I After primary school, I think my parents made a big decision to send me to a private school. We couldn't really afford it, but they made a lot of sacrifices so that I could go to a private school. They thought, that was the best choice for me, and I still remember the sacrifices that Dad made. I didn't know this at the time, but afterwards, I realized that my dad would skip lunch.
Oh.
He wouldn't have lunch so that we could afford, the school fees. And I asked him, look, how do I repay that generosity? And he sort of laughed and he said, Jason, you don't need to repay that generosity. I'm your dad. This is what parents do. He said, just make sure that the way I've treated you, just make sure that you treat your children, with the same generosity and looking after their futures. And I think that's the way that it works, the generations looking after the next generation. But these things have really shaped, I think, who I am. I think at the heart of who I am, I'm a migrant kid growing up in Sydney. And these values of my parents of hard work and sacrifice and family and looking after the next generation go to the heart of me and my politics.
I would also hear that you often remark on the fact that at school, you felt that you looked different, you sounded different, the lunch you brought from home was different, and you had a strong desire to fit in. Um, is it fair to say you maybe perhaps lacked confidence as a child and teenager?
Don't know if it was lacking in confidence. I think it was just asking questions about identity, right? Because you're a young kid and you realize that you're different. Um, and we were really different because back then I went to primary school in the 1970s, in the late
Mm.
70s, and school through the 1980s. There were far fewer Asians
Yeah.
in Australia back then. So if you think about Kingsgrove now
Mm.
and Hurstville in Sydney,
Mm.
big migrant populations. Back then, very few. I was in primary school. I think I was one of two or three Asian kids in my year.
Oh.
And then at Hurstville again, there were very few Asian kids there. So you were physically, noticeably, you look
Mm.
different. And,
Mm.
we spoke Chinese at home.
Mm.
So my parents made a deliberate decision that before I went to school, they would only speak Chinese to me at home. Mum's a school teacher, right? So she knew as soon as I went to school, I wouldn't want to speak Chinese because I want to fit in and be like everybody else. So they
Yeah.
only spoke Chinese to me at home, which means when I went to kindergarten, my English was pretty bad. It was okay because I watched TV and I had friends and that, but
Yeah.
it wasn't very good. But look, Mum was right. Within a year or so, I picked up because kids have this amazing ability to absorb language
Mm.
at that age. But the good thing is, it meant that I had this really strong foundation in Chinese, so I never forgot it. So
Yes.
even
Yes.
though there was probably about 10 years from when I was 6 to 16 that I really didn't want to speak Chinese because I just didn't want to be different. I still had that foundation, so I never really forgot it. So that was a really great sort of insight I think my parents had.
Mm.
But going back to your question, I think for a lot of migrant kids or kids that are different, you're a kid, right? You just want to fit in. You don't want to be different. And
Yes.
back then you do get sort of the sort of playground sort of racism, people calling you sort of ching chong and
Mm.
go back to where you came from, and you get that sort of stuff, and you don't really know how to deal with it as a kid.
Mm.
You just sort of wonder, well, why are people calling me these things? And wishing that you weren't different, wishing that you could be just like everybody else. I don't think it was a lack of confidence as
Mm.
such. I think it was migrant kids just asking questions about their identity,
Yeah.
asking questions about whether they fit in, about who they
Mm.
are. You go,
Mm.
look, am I Australian? What am I? Why are other kids calling me these things and pointing out that I'm different? And I think that a lot of my peers and friends who, like me, grew up at that time in Australia had really similar questions, and probably kids, even now in the modern day, struggle with these questions of identity.
Mm.
And that's why it's so important that our Australian identity is as inclusive as possible, so that no matter what your background is or where you come from, you can feel like you completely belong as an Australian in the definition of what it means to be Australian.
Okay. On that topic, and continuing to trace your career journey and career experiences, you first rose to prominence, campaigning against Pauline Hanson in One Nation, and later becoming a leading advocate in the Australian Republic movement in the late 1990s. Oh, and of course, you also co-founded the Unity Party around that time. This seems to be like a myriad of exciting experiences within a short space of a few years. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it was an incredible time, Jin. You're absolutely right. It was the turn of the millennium. So it was sort of the late 1990s, just before the 2000s. There were a lot of things going on then. There was the first rise of Pauline Hanson and One Nation.
Mm.
She had just had a lot of electoral success up in Queensland then, and she made her infamous speech that Australia was getting flooded by Asians.
Mm.
It was also the time of the Republic referendum, where Australia voted in a referendum whether to have our own head of state rather than the King or Queen of
Mm.
England as our head of state. So there are all these sort of identities, all these issues about Australia's identity. Who are we?
Mm.
What is our past? What's our present? And what's our future? And I found it an amazing time to be involved in these things. It was an incredible time. Yeah, I was in my back then I was 27, 28
Oh,
at the time, so I was pretty young. Not sure I entirely knew what I was doing, but they were experiences that um, really shaped who I was, and I think laid a lot of the foundations for what I'm trying to do now.
why did you, having gained this national momentum, why did you not go into politics at that time?
Look, politics was random. I did have, major parties come to me saying, look, do you want to stand for election? I had all of these approaches, but I felt, I was, yeah, 27, 28. And I had a conversation with, my dad. My dad
Mm,
is, one of these wise guys, wise men. And he said, look, Jason, I think what he noticed was that I started getting caught up at the time because I was in the media a lot and I had a national profile after the Republic referendum. And I
mm,
think he saw me getting caught up in all of this stuff, like
mm,
wanting to go on all these sort of TV shows and wanting to keep my profile high. And I don't think he was completely comfortable sort of with it. And at that time, I got a scholarship to
mm,
do a master's in international law at NYU in New
mm,
York. And I was trying to decide, all right, well, should I go and do my master's for a year overseas, or should I stay and sort of jump into politics here? And my dad said, look, Jason, if your goal is to keep your public profile high, and that probably if you go and spend a year in New York, it's the worst thing that you can do,
yes,
for
yeah.
your profile. But um, if you if you feel like you're not quite ready yet, and you want to go and continue your education, and then be comfortable with the fact that everyone's going to forget who you are, because
Mm,
everyone's going to forget who you are, and then come back to it one day when you're ready, um, then you at least know you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're not
mm,
doing it because you like all this publicity and all this. And I think that was really wise. And he said, look, in his view, I would make a better contribution if I had more experience sort of behind, if I finished my education, had more
mm,
experience, had and had more to bring. And I think he was right, and that's the sort of path that I picked. I went to New York and did my
mm.
masters, and had a career in the private sector, and everybody forgot about me, and that was fine. That was okay.
Mm,
And I hope now, being much older, in my 50s now, having come back to politics,
mm,
um, I really hope I've got more to contribute and am doing it for the right reasons.
in a more meaningful way. Mm. Um,
Yeah.
when you felt that you were ready, and when you did intend to join politics later, you had unsuccessful attempts and a few, I would say, a few setbacks over the years. How did you stand up from that?
Look, fine. I mean, it's obviously disappointing when you don't win. Um, but look, I think in many ways this is also the migrant experience. Whether you're a Chinese migrant like I am, whether you're Muslim, whether you whatever background you come from. Um, I think you learn to be resilient.
Mm,
It's the reality of not having a lot of privilege here, and you understand that over time that you need to work twice as hard.
mm,
Sometimes you need to be twice as good, and very often you have to wait twice as long to get things. And
mm,
it's part of the resilience, I think, of migrants that you learn. And I think in the longer term, I think it's good for you,
oh,
because in the longer term, if you can be resilient, then that the resilience builds character. and it makes you, it's a cliche, but it makes you stronger. It's what you actually need. You need the character to withstand when things don't go right. You can't just fall to pieces and and
Mm,
and 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 chuck it all in. You need to be able to come back stronger and learn from these mistakes and experiences,
mm,
and move on. So, look, I think that's the first point about resilience. The second point, I think, is it's the nature of politics in Australia that um, it's on the one hand very random.
mm.
So it's not necessarily a meritocracy. It's about being in the right place at the right time. But I also think it's very much about getting a winnable opportunity. So there are, because in most political contests, there are certain seats that are winnable.
Mm,
If I'm with the Labor Party, you know, um, so there are certain seats where, as a Labor Party candidate, you're just not going to be able to win them because they're safe Liberal seats or they're safe National seats.
mm,
You're just not going to be able to win them realistically unless something completely unexpected happens.
mm,
So often political parties will trial candidates and test candidates in unwinnable seats. It doesn't mean it's a bad experience. You get a lot of you get a lot of experience from doing these things. But the trick is, if you want to be in Parliament, you have to be pre-selected in a winnable seat. Um,
mm.
and so, the my previous attempts, they were attempts in seats that were, you know, um, generally they're unwinnable. Often I was the number three on the New South Wales Senate ticket. So
Yes.
generally with Labor, we will get two Senate places. Getting the third Senate place can happen. It happens very, very rarely.
Mm,
But I went into it just understanding that it is a very, very small likelihood that I would be elected.
mm, mm.
I also ran for Benelong in 2013, which
Yes.
was when the Rudd Gillard and Rudd Labor governments lost power. The cycle was against us then. And so, you know, also understanding then that, the swing was away from the government,
Mm,
and that it would be really hard to unseat the sitting member then, who was John Alexander, a well-liked
yes.
Senate member. So I think you go into these things knowing that it's going to be really hard, but still it's a privilege to be able to put yourself forward, and it's an amazing experience being a candidate.
And you touched on that point about migrants and multicultural communities. That's a very interesting point about uh, us being resilient, because one observation I would make is that we are very hardworking. We often bury our heads and just work and work and work. Um, Hard work does reward us to a certain extent. However, that's it. We are then stuck in a glass ceiling, and somehow we lack visibility. In that case, how should we succeed?
I think it's um, getting getting more representation, which is really goes to the heart of what I'm trying to do, and what I hope is a change that's going to come through Australian politics and Australian leadership now. There's seen much greater representation of minorities, people from all different backgrounds, and
Mm,
it's super important because it tells people who are different, and in particular young people and children who are different, when they see somebody who looks like them and sounds like them, from their community in a position of leadership, they can go, you know what, I can do that too. There's a role model there. There's something that proves that you can do it. Something to aspire to. So this point about representation is just super 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 important, and I hope that there are more and more people from diverse backgrounds who can take positions of power
mm,
and make make a variety of changes and do the things that I think they obviously want to do, but I also understand the impact that has on their communities and young people and children of their communities. Just being able to see them breaking through those ceilings that you talk about is really, really profound.
Okay, why don't we look at some challenges and opportunities? On immigration, Pauline Hanson seems to be getting some traction. What do you think is happening?
I think it's a whole lot of factors coming together at once. It's kind of like a perfect storm of what's been going on. It's a combination of economic hardship, the cost of living crisis. I think everybody feels it. Everything is expensive. The housing crisis. We have just not built enough homes over the last few decades for everybody who wants to buy a home, and so cost of living pressures, housing crisis. I think combined, um, that combined with I think some pretty kind of powerful rhetoric that I think globally you see now. It's not just happening in Australia. You see it happening all over the world. There is a cycle where right-wing conservative sort of politicians are sort of really are really on a march. So look, I think these things together mean that people are, I guess, absorbing simple political messages of blame. And so you go, I'm doing it really tough. I'm struggling to buy a house, or I'm struggling to get ahead. And that's real. I don't think anybody denies that that is real. And people are feeling like they've missed out, they've left out, that the opportunities, the great opportunities of the country haven't flowed to them, and they see other people getting ahead. And so when a populist politician gets up and said, that's not your fault, you've done everything right, that's because there are all these other people coming in here and taking your opportunity and taking your housing and taking your jobs and crowding your infrastructure, taking your spot on the roads and taking your spot on the trains and all of this. It's an easy message to be seduced by. It comes out of times of genuine hardship, but really at the heart of it, it's the politics of grievance, and I think that's what we're seeing now.
From Pauline Hanson's perspective, though, she will be thinking herself as the people's representative is merely contributing to a rational debate on immigration and immigration policy, immigration numbers. Then, in that case, where do we draw the line between what is a rational debate and perhaps discrimination and xenophobia?
Well, a few things to say. I mean, look, there is, we're part of a democracy. And so it is part and parcel of a democracy that different politicians and different people have different views. That's just the nature of it. Our job is, look, it's not to cast aspersions or say that people like Pauline Hanson or One Nation or people who support One Nation are terrible people. They're not. They're not terrible people. I think a lot of the concerns are genuine, but our job is to make better arguments based on facts and based on science that will hopefully persuade more people that actually what they're putting forward, as seductive as it is, as simple as it sounds, as angry as it may make people feel, that's not actually the right solution. So in order to do that, we need to rely on data, we need to rely on the facts, we need to rely on science, and we need to have clearly articulated, sensible policies that give people some hope. I mean, I think that's ultimately the job of politicians and of leaders. I don't think people expect all of a sudden you're going to fix all of their problems tomorrow, but people need to be able to have hope. You need to be able to give people a pathway, sensible policies that over a period of time are going to make people's lives better and give people more opportunity. And it's our job as sensible parties, and I speak, that's the Labor Party, my party, but also for the parties of government, for the Liberal National, for the coalition. Their job as well. They're under a lot of threat from One Nation. It's their job to present a sensible alternative to One Nation, rather than just become like One Nation themselves. I don't think that does anybody any good.
Yeah, that fear mongering path that they're proceeding with. Okay, you yourself, of course, have a state election looming in less than 10 months. Um, if the you bring a lot of you bring a migrant perspective, you bring a multicultural lens, cultural sensitivity, empathy, all those good qualities. But if the opposition would run a candidate, say, also from a Chinese Australian background, or perhaps a Arab Australian background, just like what they did in the last state election, what strengths do you bring?
I'd like to think that the reason that my support in the electorate is not because of, I have a, Chinese background. I like to think that my support is based on what I do, the commitment that I show the electorate, a lot of the policies and the themes and the initiatives that we've pushed out there. The work that we've done genuinely trying to talk to people and understand the issues that people care about and trying to do something. The basic work of being a good MP, where we've worked really hard at these things over the last 4 years.
Yes.
I hope that's the foundation of my support, rather than my cultural background. So look, I'm comfortable if, and again, that's democracy. If I were to have a Chinese Australian opponent, or an Arab Australian opponent, I hope people will judge all of us, based on our abilities, our contribution, our policies, what we stand for, rather than our ethnic background.
On that note, let's talk about some of your achievements as the member for Strathfield. It's been, like you mentioned, it's been more than 4 years. Time flies when you're having fun. Share with us some of your key achievements, some key priorities for the next year ahead.
I'll do this kind of thematically around, I think, things that really matter. So as I said, my mum was a teacher, and I owe, I think, a lot of who I am now to education. In my family, education is such an important thing. And so one of the things that I'm proudest about that we've been able to do, in my area, but also across the state, this is one of the really big focuses of the Min's Labor government, is to rebuild public education. Um, Before, when we came into government, our opponents, the coalition government, had a wages cap where they capped the salaries of teachers for 10 years basically, which means teacher salaries were so low that people didn't want to be teachers anymore. Teachers were resigning and going into other industries because, understandably, they could make a lot more money, and it's hard work. So there were cancelled classes, and merged classes, and it was a real disaster. So we've made some hard decisions, and given teachers, we removed the wages cap and gave teachers a historic pay increase. And now teacher vacancies have fallen to their lowest levels. More and more people want to be teachers now. And so I think it's one of the big achievements, I think, of our government, that we're starting to rebuild public education, the importance of public education. Now that's teachers and the teaching profession, which is the most important thing, the core thing. But you also need the infrastructure. You also need the building. So there have been a record amount of money, about $5 billion from the state government, combined with another $5 billion, so about $10 billion altogether, roughly, from the federal government, going into public education. And part of that is building and upgrading schools, building new schools all around the state, including 100 new public preschools.
Yes.
So we've got a new public preschool going into Campsie, Harcourt Public School. That'll be open pretty soon, I think. So education is one of the areas that I'm proudest of. We've got great schools in our area, and there's a lot of investment going into making them even better. The other big area is healthcare.
Mm,
There's a lot of pressure on the public health system, but we're after some 3 decades, I think of very little work. We are doing a big investment and upgrade to Canterbury Hospital. So that is one of the key public hospitals in the Strathfield area. A lot of people use Canterbury Hospital, and it really needed an upgrade. So there's some $270 million going into doing a big upgrade
mm,
of Canterbury Hospital, which again I think is going to make a really big difference to people's lives. But I think, look, the biggest achievement, I think, for me in the local area are the efforts that we've been trying to make to solve the housing crisis.
mm,
There's a situation that, the Strathfield electorate, in itself is a relatively affluent area. But leaving aside Strathfield, if you take Sydney, the average price of a house in Sydney is $1.7 million.
mm,
Right. The next most expensive around Australia is Brisbane, right? The houses in Brisbane are on average about 1.2 million. Melbourne's about 1 million. So there's a $500,000 difference between a house in Sydney average and a house in Brisbane. $700,000 difference between the average house in Sydney compared to Melbourne. That's just
mm,
crazy. Sydney
mm.
is one of the most expensive places in the whole world
Yes.
to live. And there's a generation of people, young people who are starting out and beginning work, but also a whole generation of people who choose public service, who choose to be teachers, who choose to be nurses, who choose to be police officers, who, no matter how hard they work, just can't afford to buy a house. That is terrible.
Mm,
We just can't
mm,
have that situation.
mm.
So we've had to do something about it. And one of those things is major planning reforms,
Yeah.
clearing up the planning system, making it a lot easier to build new homes. Now,
Mm,
that in my area has been a contentious issue. It was a very contentious issue because there are parts of my area, such as Croydon, in particular, which are old heritage conservation areas.
yeah.
And so we have had to have very heated debates about that tension between the need to build new housing and the importance of preserving character and heritage and conservation areas. And
Mm,
it hasn't been an easy debate, but through a lot of hard work and a lot of goodwill from a lot of people, we've been able to have that debate in the community and
mm,
find
mm,
a right balance between, right, these areas are going to get a lot more housing, more density, but these areas here, in conservation heritage areas, are going to have much less density. And so
wow.
there's a balance between preserving history and
Mm,
preserving heritage and the character of those neighborhoods with other
mm,
neighborhoods such as, so that's, many parts of Croydon are like that. But there are other parts such as Burwood where
mm.
people actually want more density. They
Yes.
want high rise, they want the vibrancy, and they like that. It's a feeling like you're in a big Asian city. People like that. So different areas have different characters, and there was a lot of work in trying to find that balance. But I think
Mm,
we've reached a good consensus and balance of where that is, where
mm,
hopefully we can preserve the character of our neighborhoods, of our important neighborhoods, but also make a meaningful contribution to solving the housing crisis for a generation of people. That to me, I think if I look back over the last sort of 4 years, is probably
mm.
the biggest achievement that we've done in the local area. Um, and of course, there's the health and well-being stuff that I do, out of my office.
Housing and development is not a easy feat. It's not an easy achievement. It always attracts a lot of contention and requires a lot of bravery and as well. Why the focus on health and active lifestyle? I saw the launch of the men's kitchen, for example.
Yeah, that is something that is run out of my office.
Mm,
That's not necessarily a government policy or government initiatives. It's something that I really care about. I
mm,
was inspired a while ago by this concept of blue zones. So these are places, there are 9 places around the world where people just live a lot longer. People live to 100, and a lot more people live to 100. And researchers went and looked at why. And it's not for any one reason. It's a combination of things. It's a combination of physical activity. People are just more physically active. They walk a lot. They do a lot of house chores. There's often mountainous areas where they're walking up and down hills a lot. They have healthy diets. So they have Mediterranean diets, diets with a lot of vegetables and fish and seafood and less sort of processed foods and meat. But really, really importantly as well, they have really great social connections, family connections. They mix together. They've got great social connections as well, and they also have a sense of spirituality. A lot of them pray. They have a faith. They meditate. There's a religion or a sense of spirituality to make them feel that there's something bigger than themselves. All of these things together means that their lifestyle, just the way they live every day and their mental attitude, is healthy and they're happy and they live longer. And I thought, wow, how do we do this for Strathfield? Can we make Strathfield a blue zone? And look, we're not going to be able to do it overnight, but we've been trying to do things that follow that principle. So we've got two park runs in the area now. We've got the Hudson Park Run and the Henley Park Run. Every Saturday, there's a group of runners and we go out and we run 5 kilometers. But importantly, we do it outdoors and we do it in a group. So we've been doing the Henley Park run now for almost 2 years and we've all become just the best friends, and I really look forward to seeing everyone every Saturday. And a lot of people go partly for the physical activity but partly for the social interaction. And there's a bunch of people who come who are actually prescribed the Henley Park Run by their psychologist. They're neurodiverse, they may have autism, or they may have, a certain type of neurodiversity, and their psychologist said you should go to the Henley Park Run, have that social interaction. It'll make you feel better. Which is exactly why, we wanted to do these things. The men's kitchen is the same. That's a new initiative we did last month. We noticed that there is an epidemic of loneliness amongst older men, in particular, people from broken families or widowers. And we just wanted, based on the men's sheds, in men's sheds, they say that men talk better, not face to face, but shoulder to shoulder. So in men's shed, people do carpentry and they do metal work and they make things. And we thought, all right, well, why don't we do a kind of a men's kitchen where we can get a bunch of guys together and we show them how to make simple, healthy food. And it was great. We did it at Cornerstone sort of Bread and Brew down at Homebush with Virginia Chong. And we had about 25 participants. We did a chicken stir fry. It was great. It was really successful. And then after learning how to make the food, we all sat down and had dinner together and we had great conversations. And so that's another example of how do you do things together in groups, relay key messages about healthy living, but give people an opportunity to have social connection, to make new friends. And if you do that, it's not just good for your physical health, it's also good for your mental health. It's good for the health of the community as well. So all of these things are interconnected: physical health, mental health, community, social health, environmental health, and economic health. All of these things are interconnected. And so that's what we're trying to do here in Strathfield.
I haven't attended these events,
You
but I
should
do.
come. You should come down.
I should get up.
Everyone's welcome.
I do follow them with avid interest whenever I see a post online. Well, whenever you guys try to help and save a puppy, when the rabbits help a puppy the other day, and when the men doing cooking classes, some are really great, but some look like they struggle with cooking. So I follow them.
It was a it was a lot
Interest.
of it was a lot of fun, and we try to do a lot of these things. We have a program called Harvest Helpers, which is a food rescue. We pick up um, um, food rescue, so food that is still good to eat, but needs, the supermarkets can't sell. We pick up from Woolworths and Aldi stores in our area, and we deliver them to food charities like the Salvation Army and St. Paul's Anglican Church in Burwood, and they're handed out to members of the community who are vulnerable, who need them. We have wellbeing seminars, so about once a month or every 2 months, we will have a community seminar about a topic around wellbeing. Just on Wednesday coming up, we've got one on energy. how to save money on your power bills. Should you install solar or battery? What's the new best thing coming in electric vehicles? So it's, we try to do these practical things to give people meaningful information about living healthier, things that can help them in a practical way in their lives.
Okay, continue up all the good work. And we come to a wrap now with last but not least, a final question. If you were once that schoolboy who wondered how to fit in, do you think you fit in now?
That's a really deep question, Jin. I'm trying to, but I can say honestly, every day, I still feel how I'm different. Every day I still confront, even as an MP now, I still feel different. I feel like, you need to work harder. You need to be twice as good. You need to work twice as hard, and sometimes you need to wait twice as long. And so there's still a lot of work to do, to level the playing field and to give that sort of equity, in Australian. I think we are doing much better, than in the past, but we need to keep going. We need to have good arguments and strong arguments so that we don't go backwards, so that we don't judge people because of the way they look, or what faith they come from, or what country they come from. We need to be able to judge people based on the contribution they make to Australia. That is, I think, the only good way to judge people. So we've got a lot of work to do in the current political environment where, there's a lot of attractive, simple messages out there, blaming this person and blaming that person, and, simple solutions like we should just stop all immigration and it'll make all our lives better. I think history has shown in the periods where Australia has stopped migration, like the White Australia policy during those days, there was a long period of national stagnation. Our living standards went backwards during those times. So we need to make those arguments, and we need to make them as simply and powerfully as possible to say, well, we need to build more houses, but if you stop migrants from coming in, who's going to build the houses? You need the migrant labor to actually help you build the houses. So we need to make better arguments than our opponents, about these issues. But that's our job. That's our challenge, and I'm confident we're up to the challenge. So when you ask, do I feel like I belong now? I think I can say I feel more like I belong than I think in the past, but there's still a long way to go. And so I really want to encourage your audience, anybody who's different, whether they come from a Muslim background, an Asian background, or whatever, make your voices heard. Grab opportunities to step up, to be a leader, and you will make a difference through all the great things that you do practically. But most importantly, you will make a huge difference to people who can see you, kids, younger people who can see you, who look like you and sound like you, who come from your background, and they will think to themselves, look, I can do that too. I can be that as well. And if you can do that, if we can all do that, we will create a much stronger sense of belonging, for Australians of all backgrounds.
On that note, we come to a wrap. Thank you, Jason, once again for joining us today. And once again, to all our audience, thank you for tuning in to Beyond Politics. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned to Ozark Media.